Welcome everybody to Silicon Valley Clean Energy Board of Directors meeting. Let's start off with a call to order.
Thank you. I will begin to my left. Director Hilton.
Here.
Director Scozola.
Here.
Director Mohan.
Here.
Director Makachuk.
Present.
Director Chua.
Here.
Chair Tyson.
Here.
Vice Chair Walia.
Here.
Director Rennie.
Here.
Director Klein.
Present.
Director Lee.
Present.
Director Meadows.
Present.
Director Martinez-Beltran.
Present.
Thank you. I'll note Director Abay-Koga is absent, but we do have a quorum of the board.
Great, thank you very much. Let's move on to public item comment on matters not listed on the agenda. You can see on the agenda some of the conditions for that. Do we have any public comments in the room? Seeing none, do we have any online? We do not. Thank you very much. In that case, let's move on to the consent calendar. And do we have any comments from the members of the board on the consent? I do not see any. Do we have any members of the public who wish to comment on our consent calendar? I do not see any in the room, and we don't have any online. Do we have a comment, Director Martinez-Beltran?
I was going to move to approve.
Go ahead, please do.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Let's go ahead with the roll call.
We actually do not have to do roll call if you so choose, being that everyone is in person.
But we don't have Margaret.
Well, no.
But that's right.
Fine.
Okay.
You can just say all in favor.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Okay. Motion passes. Thank you very much. Let's move on to our regular calendar and the item number 2, the CEO report.
Thank you, Chair Tyson. I had the pleasure of introducing 4 new employees. Lots of great energy in the room. So we'll start with Mia Yancich. She's an electrification fellow through the Climate Corps program. She'll be in the DPP programs team. Mia, would you please come up and introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name is Mia Yancic. I'm joining as a Climate Corps Fellow, working in the Decarbonization Programs and Policies Department. I just graduated from the University of Michigan studying information sciences. And right after graduating, I started thinking about where I wanted to apply my major and where it would have the greatest impact. So I found this Climate Corps fellowship opportunity and realized that I was wanting to apply those things towards addressing climate change. And outside of this work, I am really into sustainable agriculture. So I work at a farmer's market in Marin, and I also weekly volunteer out on a farm in Castro Valley. But really, I'm just grateful to be here and to have this opportunity to learn so much about a completely new field. Thank you.
Welcome, Mia.
Thank you, Mia. And next up, we have Sunny Zhang. She joined us this Monday as a marketing specialist working in Pam's group. And she worked in marketing sales before that, but I'll let her give you a complete introduction.
Yes, thank you, Girish. Hi, everyone. My name is Sunny Zhang, joining as marketing specialist. Before this role, I was working at a tech company called Handshake. I was one of their first marketing hires before the company grew 5x over 4 years. So really got a chance to build a lot of their marketing programs from the ground up and help scale all of that out. And then before that, I got my degree in environmental science and policy from Duke University. So I've known for a very long time that this is a space that I want to be in. And outside of work, during COVID, I started a TikTok page where I talk about climate issues and try to get regular people to stay hopeful about the climate crisis, and have received a lot of great feedback there. So I look forward to getting back into that work and also bring some social media experience to my marketing work here at SVCE. Thank you.
Great, glad to have you, Sunny.
Fantastic. Next up, we have Kathy Chai, who has joined Amrit's group as a senior financial analyst. She has extensive experience, finance and accounting, and also in the energy business Kathy, would you please come up and introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Kathy Chai. I am a senior financialist on the finance and admin team. My background is in accounting and finance, in taxation, in audits, and in real estate development, and also in the energy sector. I'm really excited to be here. In my free time, I volunteer in the food pantry in East Palo Alto to serve the low-income families. Yes, thank you.
Great, welcome, Kathy.
Last, in terms of intros for today, we have Sean Orgel Olson. He's our newest program marketing manager, also in Pam's group. He joined us on Monday too, and I'd have him introduce himself to you.
Great. Hi, members of the board. Nice to meet you all. Sean Orgel Olson previously was working at the California Green Business Network and with a consulting firm called Environmental Innovations. We run quite a bit of outreach and marketing for ordinances, environmental ordinances throughout the Greater Bay Area and the Monterey Bay Area as well. And prior to that, I worked at the city of Santa Cruz and helped them with some of their energy work and green business program there. And then before that, the really fun one was that I was at the Walt Disney Company and Disney Consumer Products specifically, and was exposed to all kinds of magic, but also just naturally. But also, you know, we worked and tried to impact the licensees of IP from Disney and tried to make them do better. So I really am looking forward to working here and trying to promote all of the different programs and really figure out what the barriers are to people taking advantage. We're trying to give money away. We're really trying to decarbonize, right, and electrify everything, and I'm going to do my best to try to figure out how we're going to further each program, undersubscribe, oversubscribe, wherever they're at in the future. So yeah, looking forward to getting to work with all of you, and let me know if you have any questions in the future. Feel free to reach out. Thanks.
I have a question, Sean.
Oh. Yes.
What do you do in your spare time?
Oh, okay. In my spare time, I know this is going to be a surprise, I don't go to Disneyland all the time. I usually am going on runs, going to farmers markets. Searching for hot springs is one of my big hobbies. I'm always trying to find new hot springs. So if you have any tips, let me know. And yeah, that's probably the main things.
Great.
Cool. Thank you.
There may be another person in this group who knows about hot springs, maybe in your group, right back there.
Go to a big one.
So just an overall comment, obviously you note the very positive energy and from the event. And I want to just thank the board also for the consent calendar approvals of several projects. It's all about building capacity. And so several of the contracts that you sign are building capacity for scaling up our decarbonization efforts. And so you see it's the human capital also. So thank you for what you've provided us and the ability to do that. So in that vein, I just wanted to stop with two kind of highlights that noted came across my desk. One is the city of Mountain View announced that it is one of only 119 cities, states, and regions across the globe to receive an A score for its sustainability efforts and commitment to environmental transparency. This top grade is from the Carbon Disclosure Project. So I think all of you are just pushing the envelope, and I wanted to recognize that city. It came across my desk in the last week or so. Another piece of good news, the city of Morgan Hill showed great leadership in voting 5-0 to keep their gas ban in place. I want to thank our board member, Director Beltran, for her leadership and support in keeping this in place. This is really bending the carbon curve down, and so I'm glad it didn't go up. You kept it down. So thank you very much for your leadership on that. With that, Chair Tyson, that's the end of my report.
Thank you very much, Girish. Do we have any questions or comments from the board? Director Martinez Beltran.
I would just like to profusely thank your team here at Silicon Valley Clean Energy, as well as my staff in Morgan Hill. We're critical resources for not only myself, but the public to call on for fact checking and background. And so thank you. You guys are doing phenomenal work.
So thank you. If I may have a second, I forgot one thing. So I just wanted to update you on CEO transition. The entire board updated a committee. So Monica is meeting one-on-one with all employees. I think last count was 38 employees she's met with so far. And now we're setting up meetings with city managers. So we have a few set up. She knows all of you, but we will have meetings with you also. But in terms of priority, we're looking at that. She's also working with her group to see what the next phase is with her departure. And so she is working with her group on next steps. So we'll get to that in January and February. So at this point, I think things are going as per plan and smoothly. So just an update on that, the CEO transition. Thank you.
Thank you again, Girish. Any other comments from the board? I do not see any. Any comments from the public? I do not see any, or online. All right, thank you very much. That was for information. Let's move on now to item number 3, which is the budget update. And I do believe Mr. Amrit Singh is going to be the speaker. I've got the
Okay, good evening, directors. So I am going to give a update on the budget. If you remember, in September, the board adopted the budget, and I made a promise that when we learn more about PG&E's upcoming 2024 rates, PG&E generation rates, and PCIA, I will come back with more information. So this is an update on the budget. I think at the beginning of last board meeting, Girish alluded to that the numbers look really good. So I bring very good news to you all. So what we're going to talk about today on the agenda is we're going to adopt new generation rates or generation rate discounts for next year, taking into account the new budget projections. And then we're going to go through some additional funding requests for the current fiscal year's budget. So the way I plan to carry the discussion is, I will start with a high-level recap of the assumptions we used when we adopted the budget in September and compare them with the new update. I will show you how the numbers compare between the adopted budget and the updated budget. I'll show you the impact it has on our reserve projections. And then we'll talk about additional funding items, which we have actually spent a good amount of time with the Executive Committee and the Finance and Administration Committee towards the end of last month. And there was a robust discussion in these committees. And we're going to share what the committee aligned in terms of new additional expenditures. And then item 5 is a true-up governance item, and I'll talk about that when we get to that slide. Okay, so little review of our timeline. As you know, we spend a lot of time on budget. The first row there talked about the framework of the budget and how we shaped the budget and reviewed the budget prior to its adoption in September. So in September, the board adopted the budget, and we did say that we will come back at this time of the year and revisit them. And as I mentioned earlier, we reviewed the updated budget with the Executive and Finance Committee meeting, and we're going to ask the board to actually adopt the new amended budget for the current fiscal year, along with setting rates for 2024 customer rates. And the budget also incorporates additional expenditure items. And then as we do every year, we're going to have another resetting of the budget in March when we do our mid-year budget. And then pretty soon the cycle begins again, and we will start next year's budget. So budget is very important when you deal with a very volatile commodity, electricity. So we always assess and reassess. And we actually internally, we review these numbers almost on a weekly basis. How did I do that, Andrea? I didn't know. Sorry about that squiggle line there. Thank you. So the key messages, the recap of the adopted budget. If you remember when we adopted the budget, I did tell you the budget was very likely to be conservative. And there was good reason for that because there's something called market price benchmark with the CPUC publishes in late September or early October. I think it's late September. And normally RA and RPS prices are not that volatile. Unfortunately, they're very volatile and very high. And the CPUC comes up with this market price benchmark based on a survey of the participants and what they've transacted at, and it can be a look back of 2 years. So we had no way of assessing what the CPUC's number was going to be. And the number we used was basically what our consultants were using, and it was also pretty much aligned with PG&E's initial era forecast that came out in May. So we didn't want to take the leap, even though we know at the market the prices were trading at much higher, the RA and RPS prices were trading much higher. We didn't want to make wild assumptions as to what the CPUC was going to come up with. So we did say there's a good chance that the budget is very conservative. And in the staff report, we mentioned that there was a potential for upward movement of 100 million in revenues if some of the higher RPS and RA prices were adopted. At the time, we also the adopted budget, we said we will keep the 4% discount to the end of this year, which is 3 months of the new fiscal year, October, September, November, and December. And then we said we will revisit the customer discount from January till September, and the budget that we adopted initially set it at 1%, which we will now revisit. And then also we agreed that we will come back and look at additional expenditures, which included things like funding, putting additional money for programs, and setting aside a fund for looking into buying an SVCE, an office building. So the highlights of the new budget are, well, the CPUC did come up with higher MPV prices, and they do reflect substantially higher RA and RPS prices, which PG&E then incorporated into their updated forecast, which came out in mid-October. And when the resulting PCIA and PG&E's generation rates are much higher than what we had assumed at the time we adopted the budget. So that's basically leading to a very significant increase in our revenues of about 127 million, which increases our bottom line from projected 8 million, close to 8 million, to about close to 128 million. And it puts our reserves in a good position. We are in position to achieve our reserve target of slightly exceeding 300 days of cash on hand, which is the target, to end at 334. This is again without incorporating additional expenditures. This is just looking at the budget update with the adopted budget. Okay, so this is a very busy slide, but there's a lot of numbers here, and I'll walk you through this. If you look at the first column, the first bar here, current 2023 rate, this is approximately what the rates are right now. When I say approximately, PG&E generated 14.96 or 15 cents a kilowatt hour. It's basically PG&E's rate weighted with our customer portfolio data, volume weighted using our portfolio. And the blue box basically represents what the rate we charge our customer, and then, of course, the customers also pay the PCIA. The adopted budget, as you can see, we assumed that our headroom was going to go down and our rates were going to go down because we thought PG&E's rates were going to come down and PCIA was going to go up unless higher RA and RPS prices were incorporated. The middle, the shaded box, looks like this is based on PG&E's October filing. Now, one thing to know, these rates are not final. They are still before the PUC. PUC is going to vote on them at their meeting on the 14th. And even after the meeting, PG&E still will make an advice letter filing later at that month, later this month, towards the end of this month, where they will true up based on their forecast from October to December, because the actuals they incorporated in submitting the proposal to CPUC only probably goes up to September. And also, there's no certainty that the CPUC will approve everything that PG&E is asking for. We have some preliminary glimpse into what may happen, because late in November, the CPUC issued a proposed decision. And if that proposed decision is adopted, it's actually fairly aligned with what PG&E is asking. Again, the rates will still be different, but we don't expect them to be materially different. And what PG&E has put forth is basically increasing rates in January to about 16.2 cents, again, our volume-weighted numbers, and then decreasing the rates in July to about 14.23 cents a kilowatt hour. Normally, the PUC adopts one rate. They don't adopt two sets of rates. They don't want to minimize a lot of rate changes to the customers. So we thought there's a good chance they may adopt one blended rate, and that's certainly the position CalCCA is making in this filing. But the proposed decision that came out actually is pretty supportive of their two-rate increase. So there's a good chance that we will see two rate increases, two rate changes, one in January and one in July. The last bar there basically looks at it on a weighted average basis, what it looks like from January to September, the remainder of our fiscal year, which is about 15.48 cents. So if the PUC does adopt two rate changes, what will happen is we will have a rate change in January, and then we will have another rate change in July. And it'll be the same discount that the board adopts today. We're going to be proposing 4%, and I'll go into that discussion in later slides. So if that's adopted today by the board, we will set our rates to whatever final PG&E rates comes in January, reduce it by 4% to come up with our comparable rates, and then in July, we'll do the same thing with the PG&E's new rates that come in, reduce it by 4%. Okay? So this is a good summary of how the current adopted budget compares with the budget update. The update doesn't account for new expenditures, which I'm going to go into discussions later. That shows you that, you can see the big swing is in the revenues, and that's driven primarily by lower PCIA and higher PG&E gen rate, increasing our headroom. And then every opportunity we get, we always update our power supply expenses, because those change on a day-to-day basis. It's a commodity that's traded every single day. There's a new price, and we always use the latest mark for that. So this slide shows the reserve projections without any additional expenditure. You can see we would end up, the reserves, we have three targets, right? We have the minimum at 128 days, a target of 300, and a maximum of 490 days. If you remember, this is shaped by our stress test analysis. And then we also, in adopting the 300 target, we also took into account the feedback the rating agencies gave us, where they said, a 300 days of cash on hand would be credit positive when they look at SVCE's credit ratings. So if we were not to spend any more money, we would end up slightly above the target. And again, this takes into account projected spend and projected spend for programs. So programs has a lot of dollars allocated, but they're not yet spent. So that actually contributes to the 334 days. And just for an illustration, I'm showing you a number. If I were to remove all the program dollars that's been allocated, then that reserve would be slightly below the target at 292, and that's just an illustrative number. Okay, so now we get into the discussion. In light of improved financials, how do we balance our priorities? You know, there are three main priorities the board considers. One is of customer affordability in the form of the discount we give relative to PG&E rates. The other is build reserves, or basically our financial viability in ensuring the organization is resilient to withstand the volatile commodity market we deal with. And the another element is, you know, advancing our decarbonization mission via funding for programs. So when we went to the Finance Committee and Finance and Administration Committee, Executive Committee, we went through about 6 different scenarios, 6 different ways of funding proposals, and those scenarios are summarized in the appendix. And each of the scenarios considered the varying degrees of these 5 spending items that I've listed here. One was to adjust the customer discount rate. We looked at keeping it anywhere from 1%, increasing it to 4%, which is what we're giving customers this year. And the third one was we also looked at was 7.2%. And you might say, what's so special about 7.2? 7.2 just so happens, based on the current rates, projected rates, at 7.2%, our rate, the rate that we charge to the customer, inclusive of PCIA, would keep the rates about the same. Again, the actual number would be slightly different than 7.2, but this is illustrative for where the projection is right now. The second item we looked at is, if you remember, what we've been doing is, even though right now, for example, we give customers 4% discount, but our overall discount is 5%. 4% every customer gets, and then we take that 1% in terms of how much dollars that is, and we convert it into a dollar bill credit to low-income customers. So they get a substantially higher discount, something in the magnitude of like 20, 21%. I didn't do that this time. It's happening on its own. When we adopted the budget, the 1%, you know, it was based on the then projected lower rates. And now that the rates are higher, we said, well, let's true up that 1% discount so that we are truly giving our low-income customers that intended 1%. So the second item is to true up to that 1%. The third item is we're bringing back setting aside funds for an SVCE in office building. And the fourth item is, you know, looking at, again, balancing that customer affordability arm of our balancing act, is maintaining some consistency in the discount we provide our customers. We looked at what if we were to keep it at 4% for 2 additional fiscal years. Set that on a planning basis, take that into account, so hold those funds in reserves. And the fifth item we looked at is, let's look at ways in which we can still increase funding for programs that will also include, part of that would be grants we will set aside for cities for decarbonization. Now, this is a funding proposal. We're not at this point talking about specific program items. As always is the case, Justin and his team then take the money, analyze what programs that they want to implement, and then they come to the board and ask for explicit authorization on those funding of each of those programs. Okay, so slide 9. So as I said, with the committees, we looked at 6 different scenarios, and the committee aligned with what we had recommended, staff recommendation, and this is sort of what the committee aligned to, looking at these 5 elements, which was, so let's keep our general discount at 4% for all customers. In addition to 1% that's already in the budget, the incremental impact is about another $13 million. And the committee felt that this is a meaningful discount that we're giving to all our customers. And then the second item I talked about was true up the 1% bill credit to low-income customers. That's about another additional, let's say, $1.2 million. It aligns with the intent of the original budget. The third item was let's set aside $20 million for an SVC office building. Now, our SVC office building is not guaranteed. Staff will do economic analysis, whether a building makes sense, whether leasing makes sense. Some preliminary back of the envelope analysis that we had done when we presented the original budget showed that, it could be something that pays back in 10 years. And it could be an asset. We're building an asset. And overall, it'd be better economics for us in the long terms, given that the organization is going to be here for a lot longer than 10 years. We have commitments extending way beyond that. So that's that item. And number 4, as I talked about, to provide rate stability and some direction on the future that the board wants to take, direction towards our rate, let's set aside in reserves to fund at least 4% discount for 2 additional years. And the board at this point is not committing to the rates for the next 2 years. Obviously, this is just from a planning perspective. We are taking that into account. Each year, the board will revisit what discount it wants to provide in light of the budget and the financials we'll present at that time. The 5th item is, again, there's an opportunity to increase funding, additional funding for programs. As I said, this would also include grants for cities for their decarbonization programs, and the committee and the committees aligned with setting aside or allocating another $20 million. Okay. So that was on the budget, and this item this is more of a governance item, and let me explain. Prior to the fiscal year 2019-2020, in our budgets, we would set aside funds for programs. But as you know, programs, we set aside funds in a fiscal year. We can't plan, spend, and customers can't fully utilize that set aside. It takes time for them to take on these programs. So it's the spending can span multiple fiscal years. So in 2019-2020, what was decided was, rather than assuming the program gets funded in each fiscal year and spent in each fiscal year, we will set aside a programs fund where we transfer the money into that fund, and then the programs team knows the fund of dollars it has and can design programs that can span multiple fiscal years. But the intent was that the money the board had allocated up to that point in the prior fiscal year budgets would be rolled over. And we thought this was kind of implied and understood. So that's $10.125 million. But in looking at our records, we never explicitly asked the board that we are going to roll over this, even though we're pretty sure that that was the intent at the time, to roll that into the newly created program fund. So now we're coming back as a governance item to say, board explicitly authorize the rollover of this fund. So basically this would roll over from reserves to the programs. And programs has always been accounting that they had access to this fund. So on a planning basis, that's already there. We will just update our accounting records, the treasurer's report that you get every month. The next treasurer's report will basically be adjusted to account for this rollover. So those are the main items for discussion today, and I'm happy to take any questions before we ask the board to adopt the resolution that basically takes into account all these recommendations.
I think we have a couple of comments. So just for members of the public and staff, we have had several opportunities to look at this budget over the months, as you've just heard, but we've also had an opportunity for 2 of our committees to also review the budget. So before I take the questions for Amrit, let me go ahead and call upon, let's call upon Vice Chair Walia, who is chair of the Executive Committee, and give us a little insight into the discussion there.
Thank you, Chair Tyson. CFO Amrit Singh, thank you so much. And I'm going to be pretty much repeating what he has already said, but just to highlight what the Executive Committee went through. We had a robust discussion on this item. We looked at various options presented by staff. We especially considered the additional customer discounts coming to, say, about 7.2% as of the projected rate today, which would maintain the customers' generation rates at current levels. The important thing for the committee members was to keep in mind that SVCE's goal to provide clean, reliable, affordable electricity and to stay financially viable for the long term is imperative as we make the decisions today as to what kind of discount we want to give. Given the high volatility in the market, we aligned on the recommendations as have been presented in the staff report and as our CFO Amrit Singh just talked about. This maintains the 4% discount for fiscal year 23-24, sets aside reserves for a 4% discount for the next 2 years. Most importantly, this promotes stability in messaging. The current discount, it conveys the board's direction for future rate setting, increases funding for decarbonization programs, provides $20 million for a building fund for SVCE. At the same time, it maintains greater than 300 days cash on hand, which is something our credit agency had recommended earlier this year and the board had approved as a target. So all in all, we felt pretty much where the staff report is sharing with us today. And just as an aside, I'm waiting to hear from the Finance Committee. So this is my third round at it because I'm also a member of that. I better know this by now. Thank you.
So let's go ahead and call upon Director Meadows, who is the Vice Chair of the Finance Administration, for some comments on the same subject.
Right. So I will just speak briefly in place of Chair Wei, who is not with us right now, though she was here earlier. And I'm not going to repeat the same messages that you've heard from Director Wei. The executive, she was kind enough in our meeting to walk us through some of the reasoning behind the executive committee, and we tussled with some of the numbers a little bit since there are a lot of scenarios, and we wanted to be sure we understood it, and we ended up in the exact same place. So we support the recommendations in the staff report, and we felt that the executive committee did a very good job. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Meadows. So let me go ahead and open it up. I think it's hard for me to say whether it's just questions or comments. So if any board members wish to direct a question or comment to Mr. Singh or Director Meadows or Director Walia, please give me some signal of that. Director Chua?
Thank you, Chair. I just have one quick question. Can you please remind us again what that 4% means to the residents? On a household, what is that 4%? What does it mean? How many dollars are we talking about?
So 4% would be about close to about $2.75 in terms of discount.
And we're saying we have a potential surplus of $127 million because of the new rate.
Yeah, before taking into account, if I look at the adjusted budget, which is in the appendix of the slide, it goes down to something like 73 or 74 million.
I think instead of an increase of 120 million, we've allocated 88 million for these various things, thus somewhere in the 30 plus range that would go into the reserves. Is that a fair?
Did we explore increasing that discount to a higher number? Did we explore that?
We did. We explored it at 7.2%, as was mentioned. That would keep our rates flat on a projected basis to where they are right now. But we, the committees, along with staff, we felt that, rather than 1 year going 7, next year going 4, then 1, 4% is a meaningful discount in balancing all the priorities. So we thought let's maintain some consistency and keep it at 4%, also set aside in reserves from a planning perspective another 4%. So there's an element of consistency with the discount that we're providing, as opposed to fluctuating between 1 and 4 and 7 and so on.
Yeah, I get that. I think that's a good approach. So I'm looking at the whatever money we got, it will be funneled to the resident through the special projects, projects that directly affect, has a credible or visible benefits to the residents. That I like.
Correct. So the
Thank you.
emphasis is put more money into programs.
Right.
And we're also balancing the financial stability of the organization, and that also enables future funding as is going to be needed. We don't need to put more money into programs right now because the effort right now in programs is customer adoption. As you saw, a lot of our new hires are on the marketing side to push the programs out. So that's where effort right now is.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Amrit.
Thank you for that. Director Martinez Beltran.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a quick question, Amrit. I see 292 for days of cash on hand. I'm just trying to understand, you said that the recommendation is 300, that we stay at about 300. Is that with unspent program dollars removed from reserves or without?
So that's,
Could you get a little closer to the microphone?
sorry. So that accounts for, it takes into account into the reserve that we still have unspent program dollars. So we basically, we forecast program expenditure over the 5-year period as to what the likely spend and expenditure would be. And the projection we make on our reserves takes into account that projection. So we're expecting next year to have quite a bit of an uptick in our program expenditures, and then we forecast going forward as well. Because until it's spent, that money still technically is in reserves, and the board can always revisit its previous decisions regarding program or any funding.
Okay. And do you think that's a safe way to go with staying around the 300?
Yeah, the funding scenarios that we looked at, in fact, all of them would maintain us within either close to 300 or at 300 or higher. And I
guess my question is, I'm just wondering if we need a little more in there, but it sounds like you're saying we've got it in the programs. You don't anticipate it all being spent. We're still trying to roll that out and get people on board, so that we should be covered.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
think that's a good balance that we're making right now. Again, it's a balancing act among all these priorities. I think next few years could also look good. And then, so being at target or higher than target, but certainly below the 490 range, it's good balance act that we're doing right now. And we do take into account the fact that there will be dollars in programs that's not spent yet. And that gives us flexibility in managing our finances.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Any further comments from the board? Director Mohan and then Director Makachuk.
Thank you, Chair Tyson. I had a question for you, Amrit. On one of your slides, I think it was slide number 9, you said that you were looking for approval from the board to move reserves into programs. Did I understand that right?
So slide number 9 basically lists the additional funding items that the board would be incorporating in the new budget. So specifically, it's going to...
Yeah, I don't need to see the slide, but I was asking about the concept. I think you said you wanted a formal approval from the board.
True up. Yes, yes, yes.
Okay,
Sorry,
fair.
I misunderstood.
Okay.
Yeah, so the true up, the 10.125 million. So in programs, we already account for that in the forecast expenditure of days cash on hand because we always thought that money was intended to be in programs. But from a governance perspective, I cannot look at a board resolution that says that transfer those funds, even though when we set up the programs fund, at that point we should have asked explicitly that previously allocated funds in the budget should go into programs. We didn't do that, and we're cleaning that up by saying, let's get an explicit approval from the board. So from a governance perspective, we're clear that this money is where it was meant to be. But
Right.
in our financial forecasting, we've already incorporated that.
Okay, so since you didn't have the formal action by the board, what happened? Did it just stay in the reserve? Did you just move it to programs without the?
So programs forecasting was taking into account because I thought board had always meant these dollars to be funded. Any program dollars that is not spent technically is in reserves, in reserve forecasting, right? But in our treasurer's report in the accounting, when we show how much funds programs has, how much has been spent, we were not including the 10 million because I can't find a board resolution that says this was meant to be rolled over. So now we're saying board.
So it stayed in the reserves.
Yeah, and even after the board approval today, the money technically will be in reserves until the customers take the programs and implement it and request this money from us.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Director Makachuk?
I'm sorry, have you taken public comment on this?
I have not yet.
Okay, I'll speak after public comment. Is that okay?
Very good. Director Lee?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, Amrit, thank you so much for the report. So initial forecast being as conservative was about 7 million, on the plus side, try to be conservative. Now it's 127. So I'm looking at $120 million surplus in that sense, which is truly exciting. I'm looking at the same number at the county's expected budget, except with a small negative sign in front of it. So it's a, yeah, and so the discussion is not as friendly as you can imagine. Now, our rate is still going up for our customers based on this budget. And from the point of view of customer, based on the last rate and the this rate, and I'm trying to understand, it would go up from 14.08 to 14.31 cents per kilowatt hour. Is that what we're looking at, the ultimate number for the customers, if we were to maintain the 4%?
So the rates right now is about 14.08 plus essentially 0.28 cents with PCIA. It's going to go on an average, blended average, with the 4% discount to 14.31 plus 0.55. So it's about 3.5% higher
Right.
on an average versus current rates.
Right. So customer will see basically about 3.5% increase.
Correct.
If we go with the 4% discount that we're talking about. But for the low-income customers, because of this true-up that we talk about, they would actually see a little discount from today's rate that they're paying. Is that what you're saying?
I haven't compared their rate from today's rates, but they will get a substantial discount because relative to PG&E rates, PG&E's generation rates, I think they will get something like 21% rate discount. And you also have to remember that their delivery charges that PG&E charges them, they get something like 30% or more discount on that rate.
Right. Thank you. So looking at the blue chart that you showed, it showed 88.26 million of the fiscal impact of the various things. I guess the other 32 million that didn't get mentioned here, that's the amount that is going to our reserve for the days of cash on hand. Am I correct?
Yeah, the reserves actually, it's better if we go to the appendix slide. Maybe, Andre, you can put that up, the second to the last slide. Yeah. So remember, the reserves will take into account for things like building fund. It's not going to hit the reserves right away.
Mm-hmm.
We're projecting, I think it's, I forget the actual, 3 years out, that will hit our reserves. Program, we're thinking the additional 20 million, because we already have some about 85 million or more in programs. This will probably be spent close to 5 years out. So this chart shows the red circle is the scenario that we're recommending, that the committee's recommended. So you can see we're projecting the end of fiscal year, we would end up 322 days of cash on hand, and over 5 years, about 324 days, which also takes into account projection of additional money coming into the reserves from the 5-year forecast
Right.
that we did back in September.
Right. So I'm just trying to understand of the 120 some million that we have in surplus, which is great news. 13 goes to the 4% discount, another one going to the true up, and basically, and then, oh yeah, 20 going to the program funds, which is great, but then basically the rest of it all going to reserves, different parts of reserves.
Yeah, they will hit in reserves until they're spent. The 13 million for the 4% discount, the 1.16 true up, that will hit this fiscal year because there's money out right away. The building fund, if we find economical to buy the building and we spend that money, it will hit the reserves at that point. In our forecast, we're assuming that will happen about the 2 fiscal years out in the 3rd fiscal year. And programs, we're expecting it another 5 years or so, given we already have so much unspent dollars. And then the 34.2 that we're setting aside for 4% funding, that just stays in reserves until the board, until we give those discounts out in the future years and the board agrees on whatever discount for that particular fiscal year you want to get. This is from a planning perspective, we're saying, in doing a 5-year projection, let's plan on a plan basis to set this money aside so that we're in position to fund on a planning basis 4% discount for 2 additional years. But next year when we come to the board, financials look good, board looks at this, said, yeah, we set this money aside, financials still look good, let's fund 4% or higher or lower, but that decision will be made at that time.
Henry, I'm a little bit kind of newer on this board. Why was it 4% to start? I mean, remember, they started 1%, I think, and then it went from 1 to 4%. I think that's when I just joined the board. Do you remember what that discussion, why not 5, why not 6? Where did they land the 4 from?
I think historically we haven't given that high of a discount. We want to balance these objectives. We know there's going to be a lot more money required for programs to make meaningful impact in our goals. And it's a matter of growing, expanding, and getting customer traction to take our programs. We want to retain that flexibility. We want to have the financial viability in case commodity market is very volatile. These years have been good to us. If prices, as the stress test indicated, flip in a different direction, the numbers will look very different. We want to be in a position that we can stay at a discount to PG&E. We believe we have a lot of commercial load that is very price sensitive, maybe more so than other CCAs. So we're taking all that into account. The 4%, in essence, is 5%. Remember the 1%, we just decided to give it extra to that. So it's like a 5% discount. We felt that was a meaningful discount. I looked at some of the other CCAs. I think Marin was at 2%, and they're saying next year they may be closer to 4 to 5%. Sonoma said the same. Some other CCAs did not. 3CE is one exception, and they provide a much larger discount, but they don't hold much in reserves their reserve targets are not as robust as ours.
So I'm just tell you what I'm feeling on this one. I'm very, very happy with the numbers coming through. I think happy actually does not describe how excited I am about these numbers. But in reality also is, building that cash on hand as our goal through is absolutely important. So normally if I look at numbers like that, I would be somewhere like Councilman Mature basically saying, hey, why don't we give more back to the customers? But given the fact that we are still a very young organization, we're still hiring a lot of new people, that reserve was not built yet. I think it makes perfect sense to build it up to the level of that 300 days we're talking about. But of course, if let's say something this high comes back again instead of surplus in future years, I certainly hope this board to not just focus only on 4%, if that really needs to be higher to giving back to customers, just to make that clear on the record. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And that's why we have a upper reserve target that gives the board some indication that when we get there or close to that, and we don't have meaningful deployment plan in our programs, that's that indication, sort of that threshold that we've set to start thinking along the lines that you just mentioned.
Right. That's great. And then there's one last final point I want to mention in terms of program funding. I'm really excited to see that this is going to the programs, and along with the question from Councilmember Mohan regarding whether it just goes back to reserve, but we really want the funding to be going to the programs at the end of the day because the fact that it wasn't spent. So we'd love to find out ways to make sure that the community we are trying to serve through these programs are going to be able to receive these funds. Just a quick plug here, I want to talk a little bit about this medical baseline portable battery program. Very successful. They provide these it's a life-saving program, right? Using electricity-dependent medical devices, powering like wheelchairs, oxygen equipment, dialysis machines, and this is absolutely crucial for those who relies on these. So it's not really something nice to have, but it's a necessity. And apparently the program that we saw at the Silicon Valley Independent Living Center, they had 50 batteries, all gone, right? So I think these are the type of programs I really would like to make sure that we participate more and let give them hundreds more of these batteries out there for our residents. And as our population aging, we'll need that. So I just want as a quick plug, these will be the great program that we'll love to participate more on. I see Girish nodding, so I think that's a good sign.
As I mentioned, Justin's already taking all these good notes.
Great.
And he told me before the meeting he's going to plan all of that. And as I said, before he spends the money, he'll get the board's authorization on how to spend those
Wonderful.
dollars. This is just allocation at this point.
Good. Just keep bringing us good news like that, okay? Thank you.
I can't promise that. It's a very volatile commodity.
He can't promise that, but you're hearing a message of balance, but then also signaling in terms of rates. One thing we haven't discussed here was, every January we kind of change over some of our board members. So by that 2-year thing, we're signaling to future boards, this is what we were thinking. Of course, any board can undo it, but that was sort of the intention. I do believe I had Director Rennie, and then I had Director Meadows.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to remind us a little bit of how we got to 4. So we started off with a 1% because we wanted to say we're 100% carbon-free and we're less than PG&E on the qualitative level. Then when we started getting, our reserves up and we had a little extra money to play with, we started talking about, well, should we be 2% or 3%? I can't remember. We may have even done 2% one year. But people, as we talked to our constituents and customers, 2% didn't mean anything to anybody, and 3% still sort of didn't mean to anything. So we, over lots of discussion, 4 is where we felt the threshold where people started, customers, our constituents started feeling like, yeah, you really are giving a discount to it, even though the total dollar number was not very much. I think 4% was $2 a month or something.
About $3.
About $3 a month. It doesn't show up as very much. So we're just, it's kind of the optics of 4% is actually something. 1%'s like hardly sounds like anything. And I agree, at some point in the future, maybe it'd be nice to get it beyond that. But I wanted to also remind us that we did have a year where we took tens of millions of dollars out of reserves to still be able, and we still wanted to give 1%, so we didn't want to go more expensive than PG&E, but we took money out of reserves. So this idea in this budget is there's 30-some million dollars to make sure we can continue the 4%, which is the threshold of something feeling meaningful. So just wanted to remind us of the history a little there.
Thank you, Director Reddy. Director Meadows.
Thank you. I want to further support this. I didn't mention it at the Finance and Administration, but we do have an example in Los Altos where we learned this past year that 5 years ago when the sewer rates were being looked at, the city chose to subsidize them to the residents out of the reserves, really spent down those reserves significantly, and the public did not get the sense of the real rates that they were paying, that we were paying because we were subsidizing them. And then there was a lot of maintenance and other things that are required. And so when we took away the subsidy and put the rate increase in place for the maintenance and everything, we're part of the Palo Alto's treatment, et cetera. It was this huge increase, and they were a shock. So if you actually carry for the public so that they don't see the real rates, they don't understand the value of the discount. So to me, this, having lived the example where we had to try to explain not only your rates going up, but you weren't paying enough in the first place. Nobody wanted to hear that. We'd spent down reserves, and then it was just a double whammy. So that was not a good place to be.
Thank you, Director Meadows. Director Abe Koga.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm sorry I missed the first part of this discussion, but I had a chance to look at this at F&A and very much appreciate. I think this is a really balanced approach. I think Director Rennie explained the history, and the challenge here has always been that it's so volatile. As we see, this is on the positive, but we've had negative years as well. So it's important to continue to build reserves, which I've always felt. I'm really actually excited about the building purchase opportunity, and my hope is that we can be nimble and act quickly if we need to. In light of the market right now, we see a lot of empty available commercial buildings, and so I hope that there will be something that we can potentially purchase relatively soon. I've always, in our city, we've always valued holding on to property and land, and you can't go wrong in this area. So that would that's really one of my priorities that I see in this this package. And then for me too, I as much as I understand that price is important, I think for me, the programs are actually more effective and far-reaching, and the $3 or $4 a month that someone might save, it's $3 or $4. Cup of coffee, maybe not even these days. And I know that I received the presentation about building decarb, but my hope is I'd like to get to a point where we can really make some significant dents. And it's like I've asked, how many EV charging stations do we need to optimize? How many heat water pumps can we give out? And then of course we have the multifamily housing retrofit item later, but that's a big lift. And so my interest really would be to continue to put more funding into programs. I was told that we actually are well funded and haven't expended all of our dollars there yet. So we have some work to do first, so we have a little cushion, but moving forward, that would be my preference, is that we continue to fund programs rather than provide the $3 free coffee. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Director. Director Scazola.
Yeah, I just, first of all, I want to say thank all of my fellow directors that are making really great points, and I'm generally in agreement with everything that's already been said. I just want to mention that in my experience, most of the people that I talk to they're much more interested and proud, I would even say, of the mission of SVCE. They love to know that even though, basically what I'm saying is the discount of any percentage, I feel, is like the cherry on top for most of the people I've talked to. They're like, oh, that's great that even if it is just 1%, even if we do have to go back down to that 1% level in the future, that most of the people I talk to, they're much more interested in the fact that, you know, we're very focused on this clean energy future. And so I'm so glad that we're at this 4% rate. I think it does feel like like a genuine, we were talking about the 1% not too long ago, and 4%, it's like, oh, that does sound, you know, like a much bigger bite of the apple. So I'm loving this. I also agree it feels like a very, very balanced approach to the budget. And I also, you know, I've mentioned it many times before, I love the programs. I'm glad to see that we're continuing to fund that and have a lot in the reserves. Oh, and I can't say that enough. The reserves, I'll say it over and over and over again. So I'm so happy to see that we're on target for these really huge reserves. And that's about it for me.
All right, thank you for that. Do we have, I don't see any further comments, so I'm going to open up to the public. Do we have any members of the public who wish to speak on this item? I see one coming up to the microphone, Mr. Carney, who are eager to hear your words.
Thank you so much. Several things I'd like to say. Take a look at page 4 of the lovely handout. This is a graph similar to the one I showed last month at the board meeting that shows that emissions in 2022 were higher than they were before the pandemic. And the reason for that is that SVCE reports higher carbon emissions in 2022 than they used to, 72 pounds per megawatt hour. And last month, the core thing we talked about was, would we still be able to procure 100% clean energy or not? Or what about the $30 million it was going to cost to do that? Well, we haven't talked about that at all tonight, and it's very important to me because I would hope that we don't double the carbon emission per kilowatt hour because that would make the carbon curve bend completely the wrong way for the third year in a row. So I'm disappointed that there hasn't been a conversation about that in the slides or from the dais. Another thing I'd like to mention is that every CCA includes one of 3 words that start with C in its name: community, or choice, or clean. You've chosen clean, and so have many of the other Peninsula and Bay Area CCAs. The ones in Southern California tend to focus on community and choice, not clean, and they are not clean. So there was a comment about messaging. The messaging of the name of this organization is about clean, and so it's critical that you do everything you can, including spending $30 million, if that's what it takes, to continue to be clean. I'd like to respond very briefly to what Director Meadows said about subsidies and the sewer rates in Los Altos. Last month, you voted to subsidize the price of green prime. I spoke against that, and I'd like to just remind you that this is what happens when you have a subsidy, and particularly if you let it go for a couple of years, it's very hard to unwind it. Last point that I'll make in my minute is, for those of you who look closely at your electricity bill, you'll notice that nowhere is PG&E's generate printed on it. So it is literally impossible for an ordinary customer to compare PG&E's generate to SVCE's and then remember to add the PCIA and then do the math and figure out if they're paying less or more or the same as PG&E for electricity. And of course, electricity consumption changes every month. PG&E raises its prices about every other month, transmission and distribution. So I think the board is overemphasizing its understanding of how the decisions you make affect the customer. Last point, next year, let's have this meeting after the PUC meeting on Thursday, not the day before. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carney. Do we have any other comments from the public? I don't see any here. Are there any online? I do not see any. So let's bring it back to the board. And I think, was there a comment then from Director Makachuk?
Yes, I was going to make a number of comments, but my other board members jumped in front of me with all the comments. So in the interest of time, I haven't heard any dissent, so I will make a motion. And if you could put up the slide, then I can actually make that motion, please. I would make a motion authorizing the CEO to implement SVC generation rate changes to establish a 4% discount to PG&E's applicable generation rates when PG&E's updated rates are implemented, expected to be January 1, 2024. And I'll just say, et
Dr.
cetera.
McIntosh, could I just suggest that your motion reflects slide 11?
My motion reflects slide 11 as printed.
A second.
Thank you. And just to confirm, that is Resolution 2023-20.
That is correct.
Let's go ahead with the vote.
We don't have to do roll call if you don't want to.
Oh. I can't get used to this. Everybody, all in favor? Say
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? The ayes have it. Thank you very much for a robust discussion. Let's move on now to item number 4. And yes.
Tyson, would you like me to start?
Yes, please. That's what my cheat sheet
Sorry.
tells me is going to happen. So yes, I would like
Cheat
that.
sheet that we gave you, yeah. Sorry about that. Thank you, Chair Tyson, members of the board. The recommendation here that we took to the executive committee is to create an ad hoc committee, and so ad hoc transition committee to help with the CEO transition, sharing of best practices, and at the executive committee, we did get some feedback, very useful feedback about what this ad hoc committee is not about. No discussion of policy issues that would be dealt with typically by the executive committee or finance committee or audit committee. This is the first time we've gone through a transition like this. We are much larger than we were when I was hired 6 years ago. And so Monica and I have chatted. This seems like she's good with the idea. I'm good with the idea. We've talked to the steering committee. So it's more of a support to Monica after I leave that she can call on whenever she wants to as she's taking on this role. And prior to the transition, it's a transfer of best practices that we are doing internally, but we want to make sure that in a way we are over-communicating with the board, having as much support as necessary for this transition. But Chair Tyson, over to you.
Great, thank you, Girish. And just to echo what you just heard, the whole thought is this is a very complex role that Monica is stepping into, and that we wanted to provide this subcommittee as an additional means of support. There's so many external points of contact that we thought that this would provide that continuity that we were seeking. So I'll look for comments. Do we have one from Director Makachuk?
Yes, I'll be succinct. I think that this is a natural progression from the search committee, and I think it would be great if we had a continuation of the 3 directors that were on the search committee, which I believe were directors Tyson, Walia, and Rene.
Thank you. Any other comments? In that case, I'd be looking for a public comment. I do not see any public comment online either. And so may I have a motion?
Move the recommendation to continue the committee. And do we appoint at this time, or? It's
creating that.
Yes.
Second.
Yes. Who was the second? Was that? Okay. Great. We've had a motion and a second, so I've got the memo. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great. Let's move on to item number 5. And we have 2 new speakers.
Good evening, Board. My name is Nupur Harmath. I'm the Manager of Decarbonization Programs, and I'm here tonight with Leanna Wynn, our Senior Program Specialist. We wanted to take a few minutes tonight to specifically highlight one of our new programs, our multifamily direct install program. Normally, this would have been a consent calendar item, but we're super excited about this new program and wanted to share some of the details with you. So next slide, please. Oh, thank you. So as you heard several times tonight, retrofit is this big hill that we're trying to climb right now. And really trying to electrify affordable multifamily buildings is going to be an even bigger challenge. For the most part, it takes a humongous effort on the property manager's part. It has a lot of financial, logistical, and workforce-related barriers associated with it. And so what we're really trying to do in our program that Leanna is going to highlight today is streamline the process of retrofitting large multifamily buildings and really move more than half the steps in that process off the property manager's plate onto SVCE's plate. But of course, this comes with a significant level of investment. If we take stock of all the affordable multifamily housing in our service area, there are more than 8,000 units that we would have to electrify. And to try to electrify all of these is going to cost on the order of $250 million. Our program budget here is about $12.5 million, which was previously approved by the board. So it's only a fraction of that cost, but running this type of program really helps us identify the barriers that we might run into and identify potential solutions that we might need to scale it across our service territory. So with that, I'll turn it over to Leanna.
Great, thank you, Nopur. Good evening, board. My name is Leanna Huynh, and I'm super excited to be talking to you about the Clean and Healthy Affordable Multifamily Properties, or CHAMP program. CHAMP is a direct install program that's targeted to existing deed-restricted affordable multifamily properties with 5 or more units. And as you can see in the figure on the right, there are 4 major program elements. And so the program will provide no-cost upgrades through an SVCE contractor that will be paid prevailing wage. After the electrification equipment is installed, tenants will receive education and training on how to use and maintain the equipment. They'll also get assistance in enrolling in SVCE's e-elect rate and then how to save money on their monthly bill through that rate. And so with our $12.5 million program budget, the program intends to fully electrify 300 to 1,000 electric dwelling units and also install 125 EV charging ports. And so we intend to stretch this program budget by leveraging outside incentives such as Tech Clean California and Bay Ren. And so the amount that we'll be able to leverage really varies based on like the building type and also the upgrades that we'll be making. And so, for that reason, that's why you see such a wide range of the buildings that we'll be able to serve. And so the objectives in support of these goals are twofold. So first, for property owners, we want to create an easy installation option that removes a lot of the barriers that Nopur had mentioned. And secondly, for tenants, especially because these folks are low income, we want to give them greater access to healthy all-electric housing with lower energy costs. So properties can participate based on the support that they need via 2 program pathways. So the first pathway, which is what we've been talking about, is the direct install pathway. So this is for customers who need more white glove support, so we'll be helping them from start to finish. And we've allocated $11 million towards that part of the program. For the second part, this is for properties that already have a prevailing wage contractor and a project under design. And so they just need financial support, and so we'll be providing that in the form of gap funding grants. And we've allocated $1.5 million towards that part of the program. And so we really needed a diverse and experienced team to be able to deliver this super comprehensive program. And so we ran an RFP, and through this competitive solicitation, we ended up selecting the Association for Energy Affordability, or AEA.
And so AA is a nonprofit, and they have a ton of experience in the multifamily sector across the nation. And so they'll be acting as the program operator and leading building electrification installation services. And they've assembled this amazing team with really unique skills and resources to be able to deliver the program. So the first consultant is RMI. They are an international leader in energy and climate. The second one is Ecology Action, and they will be doing our EV installation work, and we have had a successful partnership through our Innovation On-Ramp grant with them. Next is ATM Engineering, and they are doing our electrical engineering services. And then last but not least is Actera. So they are a local nonprofit that will be doing the tenant engagement, and they have also successfully partnered with us through our community engagement grants. And so Nupur and I have talked about why we need a direct install program, the services that are included in the program, and also who will be implementing it. So now I want to transition and talk a little bit more about how we're designing the program with stakeholder needs and concerns addressed. And so we reached out to property owners and experts in this field and asked them, like, what do we need to be including to make a successful program? And so these 4 needs and considerations rose to the top in terms of what our program needed to do in order to be successful. So the first was to address non-energy barriers. Lead and asbestos, generally in older buildings, can be very prohibitive in making building owners pursue building electrification upgrades. And so the program will pay for these ancillary upgrades. The second was to maximize the properties served. And so as I mentioned, we'll be pursuing third-party incentives to stretch our program budget. Next was to develop a sustainable workforce, and so we'll be paying prevailing wage for all these contractors and installers who are doing the upgrades. And lastly, we wanted to make sure that tenants were protected from eviction and increased bill costs. So we'll be making sure to incorporate this in the final program design, and AA will be hosting a series of stakeholder focus groups before launching the program. And so here's a snapshot of our timeline and next steps. We have already come up with a preliminary program design. We plan to select AEA through the RFP, and after the board approves this contract with AEA, they will host a series of stakeholder focus groups to finalize the program design and launch the program in May. So to get started on CHAMP and championing multifamily electrification, we are seeking the board's approval to execute a contract with AEA for $11 million for a period of 5 years. Thank you so much, and I'm happy to take questions now.
Great. I will choose Director Klein and then Director Rennie, and then I'll look over this way. Okay.
Thank you very much, Chair. And as far as these units are concerned, I had several questions. First, are you focusing on rental versus ownership for multifamily, or for the people actually in these units? Are you only looking at 100% affordable, or are you looking at, there's, from a Sunnyvale standpoint, we have deed restrictions below market rate units, and so trying to figure out, is there a focus from a multifamily, or is it a wider net?
Yeah, so we definitely want to be focusing our resources in deed restricted affordable, and we recognize that there are certain properties that also have market rate in them. And so we will be prioritizing properties that are 100% deed restricted affordable. And as you saw, we can only serve, a range of 300 to 1,000 dwelling units. So we're only expecting, a handful of actual properties to be enrolled into the program throughout our service territory.
So the 8,000 units that you list earlier in the presentation, is that 100% affordable rental? So, is it from that standpoint that you're mainly focusing, or a subset of, so you're looking at 100% affordable, that 8,000 is all 100% affordable, or was it a mixture that from that number?
Correct. So that 8,000 is actually an estimate, and that data actually comes from the state's low-income housing tax credit. And so we use that as a proxy to be able to identify affordable multifamily. Because as you know, there's also affordable multifamily that's not deed restricted, and so it's harder to pinpoint that. So we know for a fact that those 8,000 are 100% affordable.
Fantastic. And then as far as that 8,000, have you done outreach towards, I'll say, the standard players in the South Bay as far as Mid-Peninsula Housing, First Community, to figure out how many units per, of the 8,000, is half of it under the umbrella of 4 or 5 different development, or let's say affordable housing nonprofits? What's the general breakdown? Because I think that there's value in scale, that it's like, okay, if we have one of the affordable housing nonprofits on board, immediately going through that process with one development and then conceivably moving on to the next one, they understand the process, and conceivably we prop them up to do this on their own going forward.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for the question. So as a part of our program design, we reached out to Mid-Penn, First Community Housing, Eden, and to gather, just their feedback on the general program design. And Mid-Penn is actually one of the biggest developers in our service territory with 17 properties. So getting their feedback early on was really important to us. And so, we plan to work with the big developers, but there's also smaller developers in our community as well. And so one of the, points that Nupur had made is to really learn about scalability. So we want to be able to help both large developers while also small. So we want to kind of be very diverse in our selection, but definitely being able to scale and choosing larger property developers who have a lot of units in our service territory will be able to help us scale.
No, and I appreciate that focus on economy of scale, because that I think is, as you really start looking at the needs, that's the best way to really move the needle. It's not that it's not important from the 4-unit, 6-unit, 8-unit developments, but definitely moving the needle with 100 units and things of that nature, I think has a lot of value. And I just want to thank you for the presentation. And this is why, from our last item, looking at the budget, why we're running these programs because it's the decarbonization, especially of multifamily. And when you're talking about affordable housing, as much as they would like to decarbonize and focus on, electrifying, they're focused on building housing. So what we're trying to do here, and what this program helps, is them to focus on their most important thing is creating housing, while we can help them decarbonize at the same time. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Klein. We'll go Director Rennie, then Director Hilton, and then Director Lee.
I think part of my question is already getting answered. I was thinking along the lines of Director Klein about the efficiency of the program, and when you said you're only doing a handful, that may solve part of the problem. I started thinking, okay, you've got a program that you want to try to apply across 13, 14 jurisdictions in the county, and because Tony hasn't yet got us all doing the same permits, every one of them you're going to have to figure out, the different permit needs, or maybe the different inspection ways they go about it. And so I was wondering if you had thought about, from efficiency of the program that way, if you're only doing a handful, I hate to say it, but maybe you only want to focus in a couple cities, so that to start, they've got the efficiency of redoing with the same city, because I find contractors or architects that aren't used to Los Gatos, they get hung up and they do cycles before they figure out what our staff is actually asking them for, and so forth. So my question really was, or suggestion was, to be thinking about the efficiency of it from that standpoint, and Director Klein's point about getting a big one like Mid-Penn, who has to carry the process for you somewhat, doing it over and over is also part of the efficiency part of it. But I wanted you to think about the whole permitting and inspection part of it, and how it's going to be different in each city. And at first, until you got to your slide of, you basically have one contractor trying to do all cities, I was starting to think, well, maybe you should focus on the contractors that know these cities and the contractors that know these cities versus trying to get somebody who's used to Palo Alto to come down to Los Gatos and get hung up, particularly only if you're going to do a handful of them. Any thoughts on that or my suggestion? Or
Yeah, no, thank you for the suggestion. So the Association for Energy Affordability will be serving as a general contractor in the program, but they are also a technical services organization. So they've been doing a lot of trainings to contractors and whatnot, and so they will be training the sub-consultant installers through the program so that we can also be developing the workforce so that more contractors can know how to install these electrification equipment and to be able to get to scale. So, one of the things too is also learning a lot about the permit processes, like what is it like in different cities and, what should we be learning from those processes to be able to scale across our entire service territory.
I'll just add that another team member on AEA's team is RMI, and part of why they're on board is because they're going to be building out these building typologies so that we understand how different types of buildings or different systems within different buildings can be electrified. And once they create some sort of template, essentially, for us to be able to scale this program in the future. And so even if it's not SVCE that's running a broader program, but there's state funding that's going into the equitable decarbonization program, et cetera. Learnings from this program could help inform that broader process.
Okay, that sounds good. That, again, the message is around thinking about ways to make it more efficient and thinking about the ways that it's not going to be efficient.
Great, thanks for that. Director Hilton?
Thank you. I too am excited about programs like this where we can bring the profits from SVC back to our community. I want to talk a little bit about the tenant protections because I'm interested to see or to hear how you're going to ensure no rent evictions and explore the bill protection. And I do understand the economies of scale, to go for bigger units, but there are a lot of units in the city of Gilroy where I live where there's a lot of affordable housing units that are deed restricted and they're built in the 80s and such that, are going through extreme heat, conditions and stuff like that. So these modifications would greatly benefit them, but a lot of them might be 5 units or smaller. And I think that sometimes having a good example of a smaller unit, an older unit, and maybe even like the ones you're talking about that have to go through asbestos and lead abatement might be a good example for the region. But so knowing that all of our cities have different renter protections and such too, can you just talk real briefly about how you're going to be able to ensure that there's no rent evictions?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So that's definitely something that we want to be exploring in stakeholder focus groups. And we have seen different models and how other programs have dealt with it. One of which is through participation agreements in making sure that the property owner knows that the investments that we are putting into the property can be taken back from them if they are not compliant with our tenant protections. And so that kind of puts like an incentive for the property owners to, essentially not do that. And so we've been working with our legal team on this language. And so once we get further into program design, we'll present that to the stakeholders to make sure that they understand it and also to seek their feedback on it.
Thank you. And lastly, there's a lot of, in most of our communities, there's really good small community-based organizations that already do a lot of tenant protections work, as you probably know. And that would be very useful that if you end up coming into one of our cities to reach out to us so we can make those introductions to those different nonprofits.
Yeah, we would love that. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. We'll go with Director Lee and then Director Abekoga and then Director Martinez Beltran.
Yes, first, really thank you for the good work on developing this great, exciting program, and really glad to see the progress that's been happening with AEA. And it's certainly a great first step to help multi-family properties electrified because this is such a big lift for the sector. And as mentioned by Mayor Klein, the multifamily, especially rental apartments, I think is where the area that we really need to look at, because so many low-income renters would love to use an electric car, for example, but without having the ability to plug in at home, it's almost make it impossible for them to do that. And also the lack of these electric vehicle charging ports at these properties also makes it such that if you can buy those cars, then you won't be able to take advantage of the rebates or the tax credit as well that's being offered so generously right now through IRA and all those wonderful things. So I really do see that this program, especially the charging ports, that's one of the key part of making this very successful in the long run. And on the number side, it went from we were able to get $9.5 more million from the December vote to $12.5 million. And so in that sense, roughly how many more of these charging ports are we looking at in total when all the dust settles, when these programs are going through?
Sorry, can you repeat the last part of
You're
your
talking
question?
about the number of electrical vehicle infrastructure, like charging ports that would be part of all this. How many are we talking about? On the rough numbers.
Oh, yeah. So in our budget, we have $1 million dedicated towards transportation electrification. And so we've estimated that to be about 125 EV charging ports. And that ranges from L1 to L2 charging ports. The way our programs have run, we care more about the actual charging ports as opposed to like the level.
Right.
So yeah, $1 million will get us an estimated 125 EV charging ports.
Okay, which sounds like a lot, but of course we need way more than that. So I just want to see if there's any thought of scaling it up, since we do have some funds, as we talked about earlier tonight, of how maybe done the $12.5 million, where maybe more of that could be allocated to just put it right into the ports as well.
So that would have to be through a different board approval. So what the board has approved in the past is $1 million towards $1 million towards transportation electrification and an 11.5 towards building electrification. So we can't really move those funds around without additional board approval.
Right, because when we voted for the $1 million direct funding for the electric ports, wasn't that before the $9.5 million was being put in?
Correct. Yeah, that was in March during the double down.
Right. So when we put the 9.5, we really didn't put any of that into EV charging, like in the ports, is what I'm saying. And I'm just highlighting that fact for my board members, is that if out of the 3 million, we already put 1 million in EV ports, and we now put another like 9.5 million, why wouldn't we also add more, because of how important that is for what we're just talking about? I'm just open for discussion for my members. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see where this takes us. So I've got Director Abikoga, then I have Director Martinez-Beltran, then I have Director Walia, then we have Director Chua. And let's see if I can repeat that later.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I'll just start with the response. I appreciate the EV charging ports item. The one thing that I was thinking is when we do our affordable housing, 100% affordable housing projects, we've actually reduced the number of the requirement for parking, and then in general, affordable housing projects have less parking, or our studies show less parking need. I know that's debatable, but right, we're trying to do more transit-oriented development too. So I think that's a factor that we should look at is, like, I don't know exactly how many ports we really are even going to be able to fit into a project, frankly. So that would be, something to look at. Definitely interested in increasing funding. I was actually thinking, given our earlier, discussions, like, with 12.5 million, we can do 1,000. So times that by 8, and we'll have it all done. And given the $100 million that we just made from the other item, it's not it's not that far off anymore, which is really exciting for me that this is something that could be achieved, within a reasonable period of time. And so I certainly would be interested in looking at funding, putting in more funding in this area. Just not sure. And I guess my question was, in addition to EV charging ports, in terms of electric dwelling units, are we looking at the heat water pumps, and are we even looking at like solar panels for developments? If you could, I guess, share some of the other features that we're looking to be able to fund, that would be helpful.
Yeah, thanks for that question. So the funding is intended for fully electrifying units, and so that will include water heating, space heating, cooking, and clothes drying. And then where necessary, energy efficiency upgrades to make sure, that when we do make these electrification upgrades, that it's not resulting in increased bill costs for customers. As far as solar, it's not a part of this program, but we'll be leveraging other programs such as the Solar and Multifamily Affordable Housing Program, or SOMA is the acronym. And so we'll be seeking that funding for properties that are eligible for solar.
Yes, thank you. And that was what the other question was in terms of leveraging it. You mentioned Bayren. Actually, our city, we've given out CDBG funding for affordable housing developments to upgrade. So I think there is. And then I'm actually really excited because I'm wondering if there might be housing preservation funds coming down the line. We're talking about a regional housing measure and putting some money aside to preservation. And I'll go back and actually talk to, it's through MTC ABAG, but this concept of electrification and whether we can actually start putting some funding aside into that program. So super excited. My other question was about tenant protections, so appreciate that. And I just want to say thank you for including prevailing wage. I think that is really important to be able to support a workforce that can actually live in the community. So thank you for adding that.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for the report. This is fantastic. I really want to encourage and encourage the diverse. You talked about looking at different diverse types of buildings, because I think it's important for our builders to know what does it cost for something with asbestos, what does it cost for something that's high density, what does it cost for something that's low. I think that's a really good spectrum for us to be able to lay out across kind of the regions. I think that's really smart. I want to make sure there was lots of dialogue, but this is deed restricted only that we're focusing on, because we want to really zero in on the lowest and highest need. Is that what I'm?
Yes, so part of it was that, and also part of it was wanting to make sure that property owners wouldn't be increasing rents after we've made the upgrades. And so focusing on this area, like multifamily is such a huge and tough nut to crack. So we wanted to take a smaller chunk out of it, smaller bite out of it first.
Okay, great. And then with that, I guess building on that, one of the things I want to ask about was tenant protections. And do we, or have you felt that you would need city help with policy on that then, as far as looking at the tenant protections?
Yeah, definitely. So would love
Just
to work with cities on that.
prepare, all of our colleagues and what we know is kind of coming down the pipeline. Okay, and then the other thing I wanted to ask about was the incentive for the third party incentive. What was the low-hanging fruit that you were kind of identifying with that?
So what's really awesome about the Association for Energy Affordability, they are actually the implementer for the low-income weatherization program that's run through the state. And so as the implementer, they have a lot of understanding of how to, leverage those funds. They're also the implementer of the Bayren program. So again, easy access to be able to tap into those funds. There's just so many out there, and we have a lot of confidence in AEA and being able to braid and stack all these incentives in a meaningful way to maximize it for property owners.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing this program forward, and I'll touch upon just the EV charging ports, I agree with what Dr. Abikoga mentioned, that typically for affordable housing projects, we do tend to approve projects with less number of parking required and therefore less. So having said that, I'm thinking a little bit outside the box. Some of the comments made earlier were talking about the economies of scale and the efficiency of the program. And it got me thinking, you have to choose a few programs. How do you choose that? One thought was, have we reached out to, or does it make sense for us to reach out to, say, architects or somebody else to get their insights? Because we are talking about retrofitting buildings. And somebody with the experience there would have some ideas which kind of projects, existing projects, because that's we're talking existing buildings, built in a certain decade or anything like that, would be able to help us to stretch our dollars longer so that we can actually do more number of dwelling units versus just one building with, let's say, 5 units, or versus going to do. You know what I'm saying? Have we looked at that, or does it make sense in your mind?
Yeah, that's a really great point. And I want to highlight what Nupur had said earlier, too, about RMI. And so they are going to be helping us with the building stock analysis and trying to understand the different typologies that are in the multifamily sector within our service territory. You know, previously, every single multifamily unit was treated as like a snowflake. And so we really want to be able to characterize, the different buildings that we have in our service territory to be able to get to scale. And so having RMI's like technical expertise on the team is going to be really helpful in identifying what you had mentioned.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is going to be brief. I have a recommendation, and I'm going to form it in a question. How will this program attempt to reach the diverse geographic area? And you don't have to answer me now. It's just a suggestion.
And it's definitely something that we've been thinking about. And so, with $12.5 million, as Nupur had mentioned, it's only a fraction of what we're going to be able to fully electrify all the units that are in our service territory. So we are intending to rank the properties in our service territory based on a set of criteria that we'll be developing with the stakeholder focus groups. And through that, one of the criteria that staff has looked at is whether properties are located in a census tract that's designated as SVCE 3 or 4. And as a reminder, SVCE 3 and 4 are the most socioeconomically vulnerable communities. And so we want to be able to target those communities and prioritize them for retrofits.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, sure. Do we have Director Rennie?
Thank you. If I could go back for another bite of the apple. Mine's actually, as you probably see, I always start thinking a couple steps ahead. So I really like the program as it is. But thinking a couple steps ahead, it takes me back to Panama's talk, and I think it was Panama that mentioned we really need to start thinking about industrial scale upgrades, and that's kind of what you're doing here. But remembering back to the couple of the other pieces of it, we need to upgrade the electrical infrastructure for it, right? So we started thinking, well, let's go for big buildings. Well, all of a sudden you may get stuck into a huge infrastructure upgrade that may be prohibitive versus just, your costs are probably calculating putting in a charger here, but not thinking about having to do a major upgrade of the electrical system. Then the second part of what was talked about was the shutting down of gas arms. So you might start thinking, you might go and look, and again, this is out in the future for you once you've figured out the program and maybe we're ready to put in a lot more money, but you might start looking into where are the gas arms in our county and thinking about which, if there's some arm that goes out someplace, and if we can start contributing to electrifying a lot of what's on that arm, we might get to the point we can shut down a gas arm, and maybe that saves cost that the electricity provider, the IOU, is willing to put in money towards the infrastructure upgrade. So that's thinking a few steps ahead for you.
Great, thank you.
That too. Director Martinez Beltran.
Sorry, I'll be quick. I I think that that is a good point. I also think that maybe by us going into this new territory, it might, we're going to certainly uncover some areas where I think we're going to need help from the state legislatively make some changes. And I think we're probably the best entity, one of the best entities to do that. So I think it could be problematic, but I think we would get to the source of the problem. Whereas the individual resident, it might take them much longer to kind of move that up the chain, where if we see it, we can just go straight ahead to some of our champions. So I'm hoping that that'll be the case.
Yes, that the state has a equitable building decarbonization program that will be launching in the next year. And so, as we launch our program earlier than theirs, we fully intend to be working with the state and sharing, our learned lessons and, showing how we've been able to do it in our service territory and what scaling might look like.
Great, thank you. Let me go ahead and turn now. Do we have any public comment on this subject? I do not see any in the room and nor online. So in that case, let me take it back. Could you put up the motion? Pardon me? Oh, okay. And while she's doing that, Director Scazola, please.
Thank you, Chair Tyson. I just want to make a quick comment. Thank you for listening to us. I mean, this was brought up not that long ago. It seemed relatively, I wouldn't say easy, but we could all see how homeowners might want to go electric, but landlords who have tenants, that's a whole nother thing. And that seemed difficult for a lot of us up here to picture how do we motivate them to do this. So I'm seeing that right here. And so thank you for listening to us. I want to say that right away. And I also want to double down. I really appreciate seeing the tenants' rights aspect too, because I have a personal story. The complex next door to me, not too many years ago, they did renovations. Everyone got cleared out, and then they just raised those rents, and it was just a horrible, tragic thing, and that would be the worst PR in the world if we allowed that to happen. So I really appreciate seeing that in here. So thank you very much.
Great. Let's go back to Director Lee.
Yes, I have a question for staff. So the motion here is to authorize AEA for the 5-year contract not to exceed $11 million. Earlier, you mentioned about the allocation that $1 million is currently designated only for the EV charging for those 125 ports. If we put in a motion, not changing dollar amount, but saying that out of the dollar amount that we're given here, we allow flexibility that you could use some of that funds other than the 1 million, let's say an extra million on top of that, that may be used for ports. Would that be something that's a flexibility that would make the program even more successful potentially?
I'm going to have to defer to somebody else.
Why
here.
don't we ask Director Justin to head on up here?
Great. And yes, really appreciate the discussion and all of the input and ideas. So thanks to the board and thanks to Nupur and Leanna for putting this together and bringing it to you all. I think that, we could include some flexibility. I think that at this point, we have significant other programs that are running that are deploying EV charging at multifamily housing today. Mm-hmm. And we can certainly always come back to the board if in 6 months we're kind of looking at this and we're going, okay, we're getting enrollment, we have these kinds of sites as the board has discussed, it kind of depends on which sites we find, what the parking requirements are, a lot of different variables here. And so, you could put into this that, staff is able to sort of flex the already approved funding within this if you wanted to, and I think that could help. But frankly, I think, based on our kind of estimates and how we split up, we feel pretty comfortable with where the numbers are today. But, certainly appreciate the points that you have raised, Director Lee.
Okay, good. I'm always for flexibility, and of course, if it turns out that this is extremely popular, you could always, like you said, 6 months or you come back to us to let us know where things are. So I'm just trying to make your job easier.
Yes, and we appreciate that, and we hope to be back in 6 months asking just for that.
Great, thank you.
I think we're sending a pretty strong signal overall here.
Yeah. Sure.
I'm going to go ahead and ask for a motion. Director Klein?
Sure. I move staff recommendation, authorize the CEO to execute the agreement with the Association of Energy Affordability for program design and implementation.
Happy second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And let me make a point. I got to say, Nipur and Liana, really nice presentation, especially your adept handling of our questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
With that, let's move on to item number 6, which is SVCE board elections information, just for discussion. And Andrea.
Yes, thank you, Chair, members of the board. So as I'm pulling this up, this is likely information that you've heard before. So really this item is to serve as a reminder that the next time we meet in January, we will be making our selections for our chair, vice chair, and executive committee for 2024. So I wanted to go over that process in addition to some key dates for those of you who are interested in those roles, in addition to our other committees. So again, in January, our chair and vice chair, this is any member of our primary directors here. It will be a one-year term from January to January, and there is no limit on the number of terms that somebody can serve in either of these roles. Our executive committee made up of up to 6 board members, focusing on policy, operational, and organizational matters. And so at the end of this week, I will be sending out some information in writing to you on this, so if you don't remember, that's okay. So for chair, I will be requesting letters of interest, which I will then include in our board packet so that your fellow board members can take a look at why you are interested in serving in either of these roles. And for the executive committee, if you just let me know of your interest, you don't have to write a letter. I will include that in the staff report for the board's consideration. And those selections, again, will be made in January. In February, we will make our other committee selections. I won't go over the definitions of those. Those will be in writing to you after our January board meeting. But again, I will just request for any members to inform me of their interest in those committees, and I will then compile that information for you all to consider in February. And this is just a snapshot of the dates that I just provided to you. I think the most important at this time is on January 3rd. If you are interested in serving as chair or vice chair or on our executive committee, please let me know. That way I can include it in our board packet for January 10th. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions for you.
Great, thank you. Do we have any questions or comments? I do not see any from the board. Do we have any questions or comments from the public? I do not see any. I do not have any online. Well, that's for information only, so thank you very much for that information item. We'll now move on to our board member announcements and direction on future agenda items. Do we have any submissions? I see Director Martinez Beltran.
Thank you. I just want to thank Silicon Valley Clean Energy for sponsoring. We had a holiday posada, which is a traditional holiday celebration in the Latino community in Morgan Hill. There were over 300 people there, many Spanish speakers, and we gave away bikes. We gave away, all the children who came got a toy. There was piñata, music, food, and lots of donations from all of the community, and it was a really wonderful event. So thank you very much for the support.
Great, thanks for sharing that with us. Director Chua?
Yes, if possible, I would like to request the PowerPoints from the presentations this evening or this afternoon to be given to the rest of the board. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, certainly. Director Hilt?
Thank you. I also wanted to thank SVCE and staff for coming down to the inaugural La Ofrenda Festival, Day of the Dead Festival down in downtown Gilroy. SVCE was one of the founding sponsors. And one of the things that came out of that was not only the constituent services that you all provided of having a booth there, but there's a Marigold Youth Scholarship Fund that was established from all the outpouring of sponsorship in there. And its main focus is for those that are first generation college students. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Director Abikoga.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to mention, I think most of you know and should have received an invitation to the City Association of Santa Clara County holiday dinner tomorrow evening, 6 o'clock at the Adobe Building in Mountain View. We honor Partners of the Year, and this year one of our honorees is our own CEO Girish Balachandran. So I'm hoping that many of you have already registered. If not, I think we're still taking registrations, but would love to see you all help us honor and celebrate our amazing CEO. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Director Makachuk?
You stole my thunder on that one. I wanted to compliment Silicon Valley Clean Energy and Juliet for driving the Silicon Valley Clean Energy all-electric truck in the Los Gatos Children's Holiday Parade, and it was towing our float, which was a band for the city of Monte Sereno. So thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Great. All right. And Director Lee?
Yes, I just want to announce my recent trip to COP28 and able to many climate activists, a very exciting conference in terms of folks who are attending, but at the same time, really didn't appreciate the irony of how dirty air is in Dubai. As much money as they have, the haze, it's not even safe, in my opinion, to go running during the day. Unless you're really by where the water, it's a little part of it. And that, this, as many have seen, the argument of how a host country that is one of the biggest fossil fuel producers in the world is doing so, certainly something that we're very concerned about. And this whole term of just phasing out fossil fuels weren't even able to be put in the final statement, as we are learning. But at the end of the day, I think really highlight the need, and there's just so much more work ahead on this. And some people almost feel like they're giving up, but we're never giving up. There's still more work to do. I just want to say,
appreciate that.
We're doing great work right here. They say thinking globally, act locally. That's exactly what we are doing right here. Thank you.
We are indeed. With that, I don't see any board comments. So with that, I say adjourn, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, everybody.